The media you watch molds your thoughts in day-to-day life, and when, on average, a human spends up to 9 years of their life watching TV, it's important the message you're sending is right. But creators don't always get it right, which is why today, I've put together a list of times when cartoons were sexist. Let's get into it. When it comes to womanizing in cartoons, the first name that'll pop into everyone's head is, of course, Johnny Bravo. Cartoon Network's late 90s show was a hit with many, and remembered fondly for its humor, celebrity guests, and a main character who was a caricature of the ever-infamous ladies' man, Elvis. But only when you look back now and see how the show has aged, you may realize just how close it came to stepping over the line. I mean, heck, Johnny's main goal really is to just harass women until they go out with him. Which is exactly what the show was criticized for, the normalization of sexual harassment. Pretty much every episode revolved around Johnny pestering a woman one way or another until they ran away, beat him up, or rewarded him with a kiss. Now, I know what you're all thinking. The point is, Johnny is an idiot. And we're laughing at him, failing to realize how out of line he is. And I get that. But then you have scenes like this from the episode Red-Faced in the White House.
And this pen was used by President Wilson to sign the 19th Amendment.
What's that?
The amendment allowing women to vote.
Why'd they go and do that? I didn't think chicks liked to vote.
Yeah!
Now that didn't have to be made, did it? But I guess compared to the rest of the cartoons on today's list, Johnny Bravo's dim-witted but well-meaning actions aren't all that bad. And how can you stay mad at a guy who does this?
Hello, 911 emergency. There's a handsome guy in my house. Oh, wait a second, cancel that. It's only me.
Shaolin Showdown was one of Cartoon Network's more forgotten shows. Airing in the early 2000s, it centered around 4 Shaolin monks, Omi, Clay, Kimiko, and Raimundo, and their quest to gather as much of the ancient powerful Shen Gong Wu as possible before it falls into the hands of evil. Now, let me preface this by saying, I understand the show is trying to make an example out of misogyny here, as Kimiko does bite back. But take a look at this.
I was merely going to point out that you could not expect to do better as you are a girl. Pardon me?
She was just trying to do her level best, which was pretty good, considering.
Considering what?
Look out! She might use her slip and fall move on you.
I mean, it's obviously played as a joke here, but the fact that 3 of the 4 main characters gang up on the only woman and poke fun at her for failing, all because she's a woman, is a little bitter to swallow. This isn't the only example either. The main character, many would say, Omi, always pokes fun at Kimiko for being a girl. And as he's front and center, people have said that they worry kids may copy what Omi does. However, the show combats this with Kimiko having a very well-rounded, complex personality where her gender really isn't brought into the equation by anyone other than Omi. But often when he does make a remark, Kimiko beats him or outwits him in whatever challenge they've got in front of them. So, they handle it a lot better than some other shows on today's list. Just before the dawn of the 1990s, Disney released one of its all-time classics, the underwater wonder that is The Little Mermaid. The story is based on an early 1800s book by the great Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, all about a mermaid named Ariel who feels bound by her seafloor home and wants to explore land, especially after meeting a dashing young prince. To get her wish of walking on land, Ariel strikes a deal with a sea witch, Ursula, who strikes a deal with the young mermaid. She will grant her a life of land, only if she gives up her voice. Now, this is where things start to get slightly messy from a point of misogyny. Many women have said that this deal is a symbolism of women being silenced, and the whole idea that Ariel wants to chase a handsome man at any cost is an example of a woman needing a man and sacrificing their identity for them. There's also a lot of complaints over the character design of Ariel. Long, vibrant hair, very attractive with an hourglass figure, well, as hourglass as you can get whilst being a mermaid. This is made worse when you take into account Ursula, who is a female character who is independent, who's gone against the grain. She's depicted as being both overweight and maniacally evil. Yeah, her song, Poor Unfortunate Souls, also contains lyrics which many people have had a problem with. Here, Have a listen.
Your looks, your pretty face. Yet on land it's much preferred for ladies not to say a word, and after all, dear, what is idle prattle for? Come on!
This part of the song basically suggests that a man doesn't want a woman who talks. A woman is just meant to be looked at. Which, well, I don't have to tell you why that's so problematic. But then, some people have come out and said that whilst it has its problems, The Little Mermaid, for its time, also pushed stereotypes in other directions. Like when Ariel saves Eric from drowning. Twice. Putting a male in the role of damsel in distress. So, I guess it's not all bad. Now, many of you will know the Smurfs from either the newish films or the Saturday morning show from the early 80s. Well, the Smurfs actually originate from as early as 1958. They were originally comic book characters, believe it or not. The Smurfs are minuscule blue creatures who live in mushroom houses in a seemingly peaceful forest. But the tiny titans must face their arch rival, an evil wizard named Gargamel, and keep themselves and their home safe. There were originally 99 Smurfs running wild, but get this, none of them were female. Over a decade passed before a female Smurf, creatively named Smurfette, appeared. She was created by Gargamel to have her cause chaos amongst the Smurfs, wanting them to fight over how attractive she is. Of course, she's depicted as conventionally attractive. As conventional as you get for a tiny blue creature, I guess. People have since come out to say that Smurfette reinforced the idea that women are a minority and an anomaly in a male-dominated world, and that they have to conform to the standards and expectations of men to be accepted and valued. This is referencing the fact that Papa Smurf had to give Smurfette an initiation. I think, though, that the Smurfs have learned their lesson from the comics and early 80s TV show, as there is now numerous characters which don't fall victim to the lazy stereotypes we often see. In fact, a lot of them now have fiercely independent values and help build a brighter Smurf community, which I think is smurfin' good. Ugh, I can't believe I just said that. Smurfin'. Moving on. Now we're digging into the obscure crevices of cartoon history with The Emperor's New School. This show from the mid-2000s is considered an underrated gem by many, being a sequel TV series to a lesser-known but still beloved Disney film, The Emperor's New Groove. Long story short, a spoiled Incan emperor named Cusco loses his kingdom, and in order to get it back, must travel with a humbler, poorer man. It's basically a long journey of Cusco realizing that there are people in his kingdom who live a more modest life, and he should be far kinder to them, spreading the wealth of his riches but also his love. Well, that doesn't last long, as the spin-off TV show sees him having to go back to school, pass all his exams, and only then will he be allowed back on the throne. But one small thing. He's also back to being a spoiled brat. That old horrible attitude towards others continued in gross fashion, especially towards a classmate of his, Melina, who Cusco describes as a haughty hot hottie. This theme doesn't stop either, as throughout the series, Cusco talks to the audience to explain how hot Melina is.
And on top of that, she's a hottie. Hot hottie. Hottest hottie. In all of hottydom.
And in the intro of the show, things don't get any better as Melina's first appearance is accompanied by Cusco creepily leering at her. This already off-putting dynamic is quickly taken to a whole new level, as later in the intro, where the lyrics say, "He's got the cool, he's got the charm, and the looks. He's got a hottie who can help read a thing called books." All whilst Melina is posing in a tight cheerleader outfit, which Cusco is literally salivating over. You can see his tongue wagging like a dog. Take a look. So this seemingly very smart girl is reduced to nothing more than eye candy for the protagonist, who at every opportunity tells the audience how hot she is. And in every episode, he asks her out on a date. Every time. They should have just made her name Love Interest Number 1, because that's the only purpose she serves in this show. You know, if we'd learnt some proper backstory, or we had maybe an episode or two which was just Melina-centric, maybe we'd even think of allowing a fraction of the constant ogling. But nope, we have no such thing. However, to be fair, I don't think this show intended to make such a one-dimensional character on purpose. I hope in this case that the show was a victim of nothing more than lazy writing. He's strong to the finish, that's why he eats spinach. He's Popeye the Sailor Man. A jingle that ran through many heads when watching the Popeye cartoons of yesteryear. A cartoon all about the titular Sailor Man, a pugnacious, wisecracking cartoon sailor who possesses superhuman strength after eating an always handy can of spinach. The show is often seen as a beacon of problems, and to be fair, it was around the late 1920s, but that's no real excuse. The show came under fire when it came to sexism and misogyny because of the main female character, Olive Oyl, who was constantly kidnapped by the villain Brutus, who wants to force her to marry him, which I don't need to explain why that was a bad message to send out to kids. Popeye would then rescue her by eating spinach and fighting Brutus, while Olive Oyl would scream and cry for help. Olive Oyl had no agency or personality on her own, and she was only valued for her appearance and her relationship with Popeye. It's the classic damsel in distress dynamic, in all of its flawed glory. Well, not glory. You get what I mean. Olive Oyl was also often unfaithful and fickle, switching her affections between Popeye and Brutus depending on who was stronger or more generous, which just intensified the theory that a woman wanted an imposing man. And if you're not a bruiser, then no woman will want you. Again, boys as well as girls watching fell victim to some harmful messages. But they didn't end there, as Popeye was also violent and abusive towards Olive Oyl, sometimes hitting her or insulting her when he was angry or jealous. So, Olive had to deal with two aggressive men fighting over her, and either one she ended up with would probably still make her life hell. As I said at the beginning though, despite it being incredibly wrong to depict this, especially to children, it was a different time, and back then, sadly it was the norm. Just like Cusco, Hercules was another in a long list of successful films to get a not-so-successful spin-off. This one, keeping the same title as the movie, was quickly axed after complaints flooded in about quality of writing, the animation, and the themes explored within the show. The episode for us to focus on, however, came in the form of Hercules and the Dream Date. Now a god and all alone, Hercules decides he wants a companion, but not any old girl, of course, as those Earth girls don't quite do it for him anymore. So he lends the help of Aphrodite, the goddess of sexual love and beauty, to create his perfect girl from scratch. His new creation, Galatria, who looks a lot like Meg. You know, his love interest from the film? Just saying, Herc has a type. She becomes ensconced by the heroic Hercules, becoming severely jealous of anyone who goes near him, and fearing he may have bitten off more than he can chew with his jealous creation. Herc sets out to make her an independent woman? Okay, that took a turn, didn't it? Right, so he's going to make amends, realize he made a mistake, paid the price, and this is just some big message about how you don't always need what you want, or not to be judgmental of people or something, right? Nope! Basically, Herc tries to talk to Galatria about her borderline psychopathy, but as he does, she friend zones him and runs away with another man. Now, instead of being a gritty social commentary that this episode was trying to be with quotes like, "Sisters are doing it for themselves," and "I am a woman, hear me roar," it just comes across like, oh, so even your dream woman isn't good enough. And although she's made entirely by you, she's still crazy and can't live without a man. No wonder this series barely lasted 12 months. The Powerpuff Girls is a female-led show which centers on Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, three girls with superpowers created by their father, the scientist Professor Utonium. In the late 90s, the Powerpuff Girls became the top-rated program in Cartoon Network history, with boys and girls alike tuning in to absorb the countless tales of three superheroines, exhibiting strength and cuteness simultaneously. Although historically the show broke new ground by providing female representation on a male-dominated network, it failed to show female anger without the use of hyperfemininity and prettiness to offset it. The Powerpuff Girls fight male violence in the forms of vampires and monsters, but even in their most action-packed scenes, they are always stereotypically feminized. Perhaps shown best in the episode Stuck Up, Up and Away, when Princess Morbucks, the spoiled rich girl, oh, Morbucks! I get it. Fights Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. Morbucks enters the fight wearing golden armor, pink shades, and a crown with a jewel embedded in it, all accessories establishing her feminine presence. The scene blazes with pink comic book style flares to designate kicks, beautiful crystals within Blossom's ice breath, and the general aesthetic of charm based on the girl's designs and emotions, all accompanied with bright pink backgrounds and gimmicky sound effects. In spite of the episode's violence, the feminine imagery that accompanies it kinda establishes that girls cannot express fierceness without a natural beauty factor. Obviously, you've got to take into account their age too. As kindergartners, childlike vibrancy shown is on theme, but sadly also falls into the stereotype I just mentioned. It's hard to balance because a show this loved got a lot right, but sometimes it's important to point out what went wrong, or at least what could have been done better as well. In a world full of division, the last thing you want is cartoons telling you how different you are, or showing people like you being treated differently. They're about escape, forgetting real life, and hopefully pointing out the problems of the past to change public opinion for the better.